It was Friday evening. I worked an extra hour to close some files and then headed home. The night was cold and the temperature was dropping. I knew my wife Karen had gone out for drinks with coworkers, but she would probably be hungry when she got there, so I picked up some Chinese food on the way. A few dumplings and General Cow chicken with any of several spicy options always took the chill off on a cold night. I was becoming quite adept at reheating food by now, so I left it on the kitchen table, changed into something comfortable, and settled into a chair to read while I waited for my wife to return. The wait was longer than usual. She unceremoniously entered, tossed her purse on the couch across from me, and announced, "I'm taking a shower. I'll be right back." It was about 9:30, late for her, and I was waiting for her explanation. Don't get me wrong, I've never been the type to demand an account of my wife's activities, but I thought I'd hear about her evening. But I didn't. Instead, she came back in sweatpants and a flannel shirt, walked straight into the kitchen and exclaimed, "Why isn't dinner ready?" I had seen this side of her before and was determined not to fight, but at that moment her behavior did not endear her to me. Walking into the kitchen, I saw that she was putting food in the microwave and I braced myself for what was coming next. She was being unnecessarily noisy with the cooking and I tried to help. "I'll do it myself," she said, and not very pleasantly. "Okay," I thought, and got busy setting the table and making something to drink. Dinner that night was quietly loud. What do I mean? I mean that she hardly said anything, but the plates were banging as she poked and prodded at the food with her fork. She was out of breath, and her unspoken anger filled the room. Tension was written all over her face, and I knew I had to wait. He would come when she was ready. Without raising her eyes from her plate, she said, "I'm glad you didn't join us tonight." That caught me off guard. Isn't that what every husband wants to hear? Well, I love you too. There was a mixture of the same tiredness and impatience in her gaze. "Is there anything you want to talk about?" She thought for a moment and shook her head. "Not yet, no. I have too much to think about." That was the end of it. For the rest of dinner, she was aloof and often muttered to herself. In self-preservation, I volunteered to do the dishes. I'm not sure she said even 10 words to me that night after dinner. And need I say that sex was ruled out when we went to bed? I practiced fatalistic marital detachment. I kept telling myself, I'll find out about it when the time comes, but until then, there's nothing I can do about it, so I'll just endure it. It went on like that for about 24 hours until Saturday night, around 9 o'clock, when she walked through the living room, picked up her purse, and announced, "I'll be back." Now that's the kind of thing a husband pays attention to. 10 minutes later, I checked the location of her cell phone, but she was still on her way. I watched and waited, and 30 minutes after she left, her phone stopped moving. She was at the hideout. The name speaks for itself. It's the kind of place where cheating spouses go so they won't be noticed. And if they are, no one will admit it, because they do the same thing. Now I was furious. 24 hours of silence was something I could still endure, but I wouldn't tolerate something like this. I grabbed my wallet and keys and headed for the hideout. All the way there, I tried to get my emotions under control. And by the time I got there, I realized I had to be careful. I wasn't going to barge in there and confront her. I needed information, and that starts with reconnaissance. I drove slowly into the parking lot and found a spot at the edge of the lot. From where I parked, I could see her car, but she wasn't in it. Judging by my phone, her cell phone was still there, and for a while I pondered whether it was worth the risk of going inside to be seen. Then I saw her quickly exit the establishment and get into her car. She was watching the door of the establishment and didn't notice me. For the next half hour, I sat and watched her, while she watched the door. When a couple came out of there, walking close together and having a private conversation like lovers do, Karen perked up. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been watching her, but I knew she saw what she was waiting for. The couple got into the car and after a few minutes of tongue play, drove off. After they left, Karen left, and I stayed behind trying to figure out what I had just seen. The man was about my age or a little older. There was nothing special about him, although I thought I had seen him before. The woman was a few years younger than Karen, and I had to hand it to her, attractive. But who were they to Karen? I kept coming back to the same thought. Was he someone special to my wife, and Karen was angry that he was seeing another woman? It was the only idea I could think of. I'd known Karen since sophomore year of college. We talked about starting a family. Everything I knew about her said she wasn't the type to cheat. And yet why was she here spying on this couple? Who were they to her, and why did I feel like I knew him from somewhere? My pondering was getting me nowhere, so eventually I pulled myself together, started the car, and headed for home. When I got to the house, I found an angry, confused wife there, determined to take whatever was bothering her out on me. "Where have you been?" "Outside." "Outside? Where? What do you mean, outside?" "I mean, I wasn't at home. Where have you been?" She didn't seem to want to answer that question. "I went for a drive." "Are you ready to tell me what's bothering you?" She only shook her head. "Okay." I decided I was done and headed to bed without another word. Whether she got the message or not, she did come to bed, slid between the sheets, and lay still until sleep overtook her. I, on the other hand, found sleep elusive. For the next 3 weeks, she remained absent-minded. Sometimes she came home on time, but more often than usual, she stayed late at work. Conversations were short, as was her temper. This behavior only spurred my imagination, and I had a nasty imagination. I tried not to check on her, but there were a few occasions when I called her during lunch and she wasn't in the office. Then she would stay late at work. The weekends were long and lonely. At times I would catch her mumbling, but I would only catch a few words. The words I did catch were the ones that kept me going. They were words like affair and cheating and a few F-bombs. The words betrayal and divorce caught my attention. All this time I was living in a cold house and sleeping in an even colder bed. Whenever I tried to talk to her about what was bothering her, she shut my mouth. I was at my wit's end when she called me at the office on a Friday afternoon, just 3 weeks after it all started. She asked when I would be home that evening and said we needed to talk. For the first time in 3 weeks, I agreed with her. She came home early, and it didn't take me long to get home. When I arrived, she had already showered and changed her clothes. We sat down at the kitchen table, and I prepared myself for the worst. She opened a bottle of wine and poured 2 glasses. I kept mine, and she drank hers in one big gulp and poured herself a second one. "I was a real bitch, wasn't I?" I couldn't argue with her. She looked at me, expecting me to disagree, but I just waited for her. "I did something I'm not proud of, and I hope you won't think too badly of me." Once again, I just sat there and waited. I didn't want to make it easy for her, and I wasn't going to redirect her train of thought. "I probably lost my job today." That got my attention and deserved a response. "What did you do?" "I had a meeting with the director." That's what they called Henry in my wife's office. Henry was the big boss, with department heads under him and project managers under them who ran individual projects. My wife was a worker, not a manager, but she had caught the attention of management and there was talk of a promotion. Again, I was silent. She seemed ready to tell me everything and I just had to give her time. I didn't get the promotion. Is that what this is about? She's sneaking around, going to rogue bars, and all she wants to talk about is her damn promotion? Carol got it. That rang a bell. Carol Newsom was the young hottie I'd seen coming out of the hideout 3 weeks ago. I'd only met her once, and that was in passing, so I didn't recognize her in the parking lot. Then I realized who the man was. It was Paul Jacobs, Karen's department head. "Did you get an explanation?" My wife looked at me like she wanted to kill someone. "They told me it wasn't my time. Then they promoted someone with 3 years less experience and a history of getting other people to do her work for her." I finally began to understand. The cloud of suspicion and mistrust of the past 3 weeks was dissipating. I muttered to myself, "So that's what you've been doing." Karen thought for a moment, and then her gaze softened. "Where did you go 3 weeks ago?" I was stunned. "That Saturday when I left the house with no explanation, You came home a few minutes after I did. Where did you go? Okay, it was time for candor. I followed you. That's what I thought. You used my cell phone? I nodded and she giggled. I'll never make a good liar, will I? Now it was my turn to smile. Thankfully, no, and I hope you never change. Why did you follow me? She looked at me, and it hit me. Did you think I was cheating on you? I saw where you parked and thought about how you left. I decided to see for myself. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms in front of her. John David Parker, did you really think I would ever cheat on you? She used all 3 names. This was not good. Well, you have to admit that you've been very distant from me lately. She was furious, but she was still logical and could understand how her actions had brought us to this point. I would never do that to you. I came home that Friday in an irritated mood because my friends told me that Carol had earned my promotion on her back. All the other department heads listen to Jacobs, and Jacobs thinks with his one spot. Yeah, that's about how I pictured him. He was a hound, but thankfully my wife didn't succumb to his dubious charms. So you're telling me Carol is sleeping her way to the top? Yes. They announced her promotion this morning and I stopped by Henry's before lunch. I told him what I knew and gave him my resignation letter. That sounded like my wife. The thought of her cheating on me never seemed like her, but that was exactly what it was. How did he take it? I mean, it's basically just office gossip, right? At that moment, I saw the look of embarrassment on my wife's face. Luckily, 3 weeks of anger was slowly weathering out. They were meeting for lunch, and I was following them. I have time and date stamped pictures of them going in and out of motel rooms and a whole bunch of pictures of them exchanging spit. I suppose you gave all that to Henry? I did worse than that. What could be worse? I also gave it to his wife. It took all my willpower to keep a smile on my face. All I could come up with was to say, I feel violated in the force. That brought a guilty smile to my wife's face, but only for a moment, and then the sadness returned. They have young children. I may have ruined their marriage. I shook my head. No, he's the one who ruined his marriage. If I were in her shoes, I'd thank whoever told me about it. Keep in mind that I had been suspicious of my wife's behavior for the past 3 weeks. I suppose my remark was partly to remind her of that. I got a look that said, "Message received, asshole." So you tendered your resignation today, huh? She nodded. Henry told me to come in on Monday and we'll talk. Well, that's good. I don't think Henry's the kind of guy who likes pigeons on a stool. I didn't think so. I could be wrong, but I don't think Henry likes cheaters. If I were him, I wouldn't want to promote an undeserving female employee who's clawing her way to a promotion. I thought about the next sentence and decided to say it. And I wouldn't want to keep a department head who would promote someone like that. It might seem strange because Karen was genuinely discouraged and thought she had lost her job, but it was the first good weekend I'd had in 3 weeks. We hung out, talked, laughed, went out to dinner, and generally had fun together until the last 3 weeks were just a memory. Oh, and the bed was noticeably warmer. I spent a lot of time that weekend reminding myself and my wife that I married an honest woman. Cheating is just not in her character. Monday morning, we both headed off to work. Karen fully expected to be out of work, and I waited for the call. The call came late in the afternoon. "I'm taking food with me tonight. Don't be late." That wasn't what I expected to hear. "Are you going to tell me how your meeting with Henry went?" She just laughed and said she'd tell me all about it over dinner. It turned out that Henry and I looked at these things the same way. First, he needed to meet with the lawyers to test his options, and then he needed to meet privately with the other department heads, so everyone would realize the chaos he was about to wreak in the office. Paul was demoted and reassigned. There were rumors around the office that his wife had kicked him out, but no one knew for sure. Carol was told that she had turned down the promotion for personal reasons and would be reassigned. She would need a long rehabilitation period for further promotion, at least that's how Karen explained it. When this was all sorted out, It was announced that Karen had been offered a promotion and she had accepted it. She apologized to me and told me that she had spent most of the day getting up to speed on the new job and only then realized that she hadn't called me. It was an apology that was easy to accept. It was widely known that Karen had earned her promotion, and she immediately became one of the most popular project managers in the store. This came as no surprise to me, as she has a strong work ethic and believes in respecting her co-workers. All of this was a year ago. Tonight, Karen informed me that I was going to be a father. She told Henry that she will take maternity leave when the time comes, but promises she will be back. Henry seemed genuinely happy, and I think he began to see her as the daughter he never had. So that's the story of the one time I questioned my wife's fidelity, and how I learned that estrogen-fueled revenge may not look like what I expect from a man, but it's no less effective when it comes.